This is Democracy Watch. Marc, you and I and the rest of the political world have spoken a lot about Paul Weiss. That's the law firm that capitulated. We have some major news here as it relates to a couple of partners from Paul Weiss that really caught my eye. Can you explain what just happened?
Yeah, so a big development. 4 senior partners at Paul Weiss, all litigators, sent a notice to the firm saying they're leaving and they are starting their own law firm. One of them was actually the co-chair of the litigation department, someone who, by the way, was involved in the original signing off of the deal. I don't think she negotiated or had anything to do there, but was involved in selling it internally. But I think that Paul Weiss as an institution underappreciated just how badly this was all going and how long it was going to be around. I mean, Paul Weiss has sort of itself in now to a punchline. I've even heard Paul Weiss used as a verb, which is not good for a law firm.
Yeah.
But
it's not good for anybody when you've been turned into a verb. That's nothing good comes out of that.
Yeah, but these 4 partners are leaving, setting up their own firm, and according to reports, among other things, they want to be able to sue Donald Trump and his administration.
And so what does this do in terms of the reputation of Paul Weiss itself? I mean, I'm not, in the legal world. Does a firm come back from this? And Paul Weiss, if I'm not mistaken, was known for actually being pretty liberal, if I'm not mistaken. And so does that reputation get shed immediately?
So this is, I think, part of why this is harming Paul Weiss so much. In some respects, Brian, this is not unlike what the Washington Post went through,
Right.
Which is that, here was a publication that said, democracy dies in darkness and had built a bit of a reputation as sort of pro-democracy. And then, of course, it does all the terrible things that it did under the direction, or at least to try to please its owner. And Paul Weiss is kind of like in that same thing, which is that if you had asked anyone, a year ago, what is the most liberal law firm in New York of all the big law firms, they would have said Paul Weiss. If you had said, what is the law firm most prominently associated with raising money for and otherwise being involved in the Biden campaign, the Clinton campaign, the Obama campaign, Democratic politics, everyone would have said Paul Weiss, right? Paul Weiss was seen as sort of part of the liberal legal establishment. It was very active in pro bono work for liberal causes. Its chairman, Brad Karp, was an outspoken advocate for Joe Biden, an outspoken advocate for using litigation to fight hate. The law firm brought litigation against the right-wing hate groups in Charlottesville. And so that's the reputation. And then, like the Washington Post, what happens is when you then pivot to a more Trump-friendly posture, like you are kind of neither fish nor fowl, right? The conservatives still don't accept you,
Right.
because you're not, and you have lost all credibility with your natural supporters. So that is, I think, what has happened to Paul Weiss in kind of the larger culture sphere. What's interesting about these 4 partners who are leaving is these are among the partners who have been involved in representing some of the largest corporate litigation matters that law firm has had. They represented Google, for example, in the most recent antitrust case. So there will be economic consequences to Paul Weiss from these departures. I'm not saying it's going to crater the firm, but it is a big blow to the image of the firm, and I think really importantly, a big blow to the proposition that Paul Weiss and the other law firms were selling, which is, this may be a bit odious, but it's good for business.
Right.
It doesn't right now look like this was very good for Paul Weiss's business.
And that's what I want to dig into, because this whole thing was done in service of, okay, what's the path of least resistance? What can we do that's going to make things hurt the least? But in fact, by virtue of them doing this, yes, they might have, staved off some momentary pain by the Trump administration, pain that, by the way, likely would have been blocked in the courts. But now they're actually seeing their own clients, engage in this mass exodus away. And so, is it fair to assume that really the benefit that they derived from trying to stay on Donald Trump's good side is far outweighed by the negative consequences, both reputationally and the fact that they're losing actual business, actual dollars?
Yeah, I think Paul Weiss made 4 errors. So let's just run through them real quick. The first is they assumed that they could make a deal with Donald Trump and that it wouldn't mean anything. So I think part of the reason why this has really hurt them is every time Donald Trump comes forward and says, "Oh, well, maybe I will use those law firms to represent coal companies.
Right.
Maybe we'll use those law firms to represent, police officers in brutality, in misconduct cases," right? Like that's number one. Number two, it has hurt. They miscalculated that clients wouldn't care. And we have seen instances now of some clients, not necessarily directly with Paul Weiss, but at least in one instance, it appears a client left another one of the big firms and went to one of the firms that was fighting instead. Number three, I think they thought it wouldn't affect personnel, and that's why this is such a big deal. This is a big deal because these are big partners, very important partners in Paul Weiss. And it shows that there is a portability to the lawyers who don't agree with what Paul Weiss and other firms like them are doing, and that they'll leave.
Yeah.
They will just leave. And by the way, note they're not going to a law firm. They're starting their own firm. So like in some ways, this is also sort of a larger indictment of big law's overall complicity in this. And then the last one, and we got a taste of it this week in a court decision involving the law firm Jenner and Block. Jenner and Block was one of the law firms targeted with an executive order. It fought back and it won. And it just received a final injunction blocking the Trump executive order permanently. And in that order, you would at this point come to expect the judge takes a shot at Paul Weiss. Right. The judge not only rules in favor of Jenner and says that Jenner, was wronged by the Trump administration, but actually points out the capitulation by Paul Weiss, points out, the deal they made, and actually quotes some of the terms that Donald Trump has laid out. And so Paul Weiss is also losing with the very judges and the judiciary. We've now had a series of judges in cases involving other law firms call out Paul Weiss. Well, I mean, if you're a client, the whole theory Paul Weiss had was if you're a client, you want to hire a law firm that's not going to be on the bad side of the administration. Well, I'll tell you what, if you're hiring a law firm, you don't want to be on the wrong side of judges.
Yeah.
Except the judges are expressing real apprehension about what the Paul Weisses of the world have done. That seems to me to be a even more long-lasting problem that law firm may wind up having.
Well, as it relates to that Jenner case, I mean, that is the whole basis of what Trump was trying to do. So if Trump's whole bending these law firms over the barrel to try to get what he wants, to try to extract something from them, if that was inherently illegal and doesn't stand up to legal muster, then what is Paul Weiss left with? That they won't be on the receiving end of some mean tweets by Trump? Like if the things that he used to extort the law firms isn't going to stand by virtue of the rulings in these cases, then like what did Paul Weiss get out of all of this?
Yeah, I think what it got was a sullied reputation. And what most people who think they can make a deal with Donald Trump is.
Right, which is at the end of the day just thrown under the bus. It just never, I mean, the extent to which it never works out for the other person in this transactional relationship cannot be overstated.
Yeah, but what we continue to see, and which just I marvel at, these billionaire businessmen are supposed to be super smart and savvy. And yet look at Tim Cook and Apple. The guy gave $1 million to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is now targeting Apple.
Right.
Okay. The law firm supposed to be super smart. I mean, they're the ones who the billionaires go to for savvy negotiations. And look at what these law firms have done. I mean, who the hell wants to hire a law firm that this is their negotiating strategy? If this is how they come out. And so you're just kind of left scratching your head, Brian. How is it that so many people who are supposed to be really smart think they're the ones who can make a deal with Donald Trump and come out smelling like a rose?
Right. You and I have spoken about this at length, and so I'm curious from your vantage, how important is it for folks to continue talking about not just Paul Weiss specifically, but what Paul Weiss represents, which is this idea of capitulation to Trump. How important is it to continue to talk about this stuff as a way to disincentivize other people, whether it's, lawyers, whether it's tech billionaires, whether it's media outlets, whoever it may be, so that they don't follow in the same footsteps and give Donald Trump more power by virtue of capitulating to him?
Yeah, I think it's vital. I mean, look, I had a lot of friends who were at Paul Weiss. I have some friends who still are at Paul Weiss. And I shake my head. I mean, I don't know what the hell they're still doing there. Anyone with dignity and self-respect should be leaving that firm, or any of the others that are capitulating. But it is important to continue to point out what that law firm in particular did, because it was the first. It was the first, and it was also the firm with the closest connections to Democrats, and the one that you cannot say did not understand the threat that Donald Trump posed.
Right.
I mean, you cannot go back to what the partners of that law firm were saying when Joe Biden was in office, when they thought Joe Biden would win, and square it with what they did here. And they need to suffer the consequences of a cautionary tale, not just to the rest of the legal industry, not just to the universities, not just to the media companies, but to any large institution that thinks it can make a deal. And, it's a shame that it comes at the expense of what is one of the oldest law firms in New York. Frankly, it's a difficult situation for me and for many other Jewish lawyers, because this is a law firm that had storied history in the city as the first law firm that would hire both Jews and non-Jews. It was a bastion of progressive integration through its history, and took on a lot of great causes. But, when it made its deal with Donald Trump, it is important that it be held accountable and it be held out as an example, which is why I know you continue to bring it up. It's why I continue to write about it on Democracy Docket. And it's frankly, I think, the reason why it's become very sticky. There's not a lot of stickiness around a lot of the capitulations. You probably, if you're watching this video, you probably can't name another one of the 9 or 10 law firms that capitulated, but Paul Weiss. And it's because of that history. It's because of who they were. It's because they were first. It's because they could have sued and they would have won.
Right.
That they are getting all of the negative publicity they are.
Right. And look, you have been a leader in terms of not just talking about this and pushing back publicly, but with what you're doing with your team and your firm in terms of standing up to this administration and not even, venturing into the ballpark of capitulation. I think that is so important, especially in light of what we're seeing right now. So one small step that we can all take, everybody watching, is to help elevate Marc's voice, elevate his team's voice by subscribing to their YouTube channel, Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.